Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to episode 2 of what I like to call the TexaCali collaboration, or the TexaCali collab. Now, this is a series between myself and motovlogger Blahkay, who was out of San Diego, California, and of course, I am halfclickup here in beautiful Central Texas, primarily Waco.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? Welcome to the TexaCali series, episode 2. This is a series where I collaborate with another YouTuber by the name of halfclickup. We're thousands of miles away. He lives in Texas, I live in California, yet we have the same hobby of loving motorcycles.
Now, if you happen to miss episode 1, you can check that out right up here. And in episode 1, we discussed our top 5 favorite motorcycle manufacturers. Now, in today's episode, we're going to discuss what may possibly and arguably be the best beginner's motorcycle.
Now, this is something that we actually share a ton of interest in because we've both owned the same bike. Now, I'd like to take a moment to congratulate halfclickup because he finally made it to 1,000 subscribers. I think it took him 4 years to reach that, but I'm super proud of him and that's really awesome. And hopefully soon he can begin monetizing his videos. So here's hoping for that.
The motorcycle that is the topic of the conversation is this bike right here, the Yamaha FZ6R. Now, when it comes to discussing the various model motorcycles that can be acceptable as a first bike, the discussion can of course be rather complex. First off, you have to decide what cc you want to start out on. You got everything from a 250 to 300 to even a 400 and of course the 600, and heck guys, there's even a 500 out there by Kawasaki that you can go with if you so choose.
Now, the Yamaha FZ6R was produced from 2009 to 2017 when it was discontinued, but we think that even though it's discontinued, it's still the best bike that you can get to learn how to ride on. Now, compared with other beginner motorcycles, the FZ6R is different because it's actually a 600cc, but it only makes around 77.5 horsepower. So that puts it at more horsepower than most of the beginner bikes you'd get. So as someone who is learning how to ride, you're never going to outgrow it very quickly. And that's where the FZ6R shines, that it doesn't have enough horsepower to really put you in very difficult situations, but it's also really great that you can easily go on the highway and not have any issue with it.
Well, so let's begin by getting into the mechanics of the bike just a little bit. Now, you have a few different options as discussed, guys. As you can hear, this is the exhaust note that everybody wants. You know, the inline 4, classic sound. You get off into like a Kawasaki Ninja 650, you know, the 650R, you have a parallel twin, which is more of like an ATV kind of sound. Not everybody's into that. But this particular 600cc motor was taken out of previous generation R6, and they remapped it and tuned it with a linear power band, guys. This makes the bike very predictable. It has a very predictable throttle. There's no surprises. Linear power. It's smooth from bottom all the way up top.
Now, because it's a 4-cylinder engine, I think this is the greatest strength of the bike, and that is throttle control. The throttle on a 4-cylinder is a lot smoother than a 1-cylinder or 2-cylinder. So it's a lot more forgiving in controlling the throttle, and it prepares you to be able to use sport bikes, which are mostly all 4-cylinders anyway. Now, one of the main reasons why we chose this bike is that halfclickup and I have both actually used this bike, and this was my first bike that I ever learned how to ride on. It's what I rode around for around a year, and it's easily one of the best decisions I ever made as my first bike.
Now, take into consideration that an R6 revs out at like 14,000 RPM. As you can see here, this FZ6R redlines at about 12,000. And so, by design, the motor is supposed to rev pretty dang high. This one in particular, though, being remapped and retuned for this bike, for this platform in particular, lends itself to the expected reliability of this motorcycle. Understand this, man. This motor on this bike is never overtasked. By design, it can't be overtasked. Again, you're talking about a bike that expects to see 14,000 RPM on the regular. It will not see it in this particular example. Hopefully I'm translating that correctly to where you guys understand. This engine has a lot more capability than what it's specifically tuned for on the Yamaha FZ6R. That means it's going to be more reliable, it's going to last a lot longer, If that general discussion is not proof in the pudding enough for you, go ahead and take a look at my mileage. That's right, I have almost 58,000 miles. And to further expand on all that, this particular motorcycle has never mechanically broken down. That's almost 58,000 miles with regular routine maintenance.
Now, HalfClickup and I ended up taking two completely different routes with this, but it really shows how versatile the bike is in being able to cater to two different type of riders. In the case of HalfClickup, he never actually got rid of his FZ6R, and it's still what he rides today.
And in fact, the reason why the mileage is so high is because I commute on this bike. For 5 years now, I've been commuting to and from work on this motorcycle. Virtually every single day, man. Hence the high mileage.
As for me, I'm obviously not riding an FZ6R right now, but it really shows how good the FZ6R is at being able to cater to two different types of riders. For me, the FZ6R was an excellent jumping off point to other types of bikes. In the case of going to my CBR 600 that I have right now that makes around 105 horsepower, the jump from 77 to 105 is not as jarring as it would be if I was jumping from 45 like an R3, which is a more common beginner bike. So the FZ6R really affords you a lot of ability to grow with it and stick with it, but also is close enough to being able to deliver you a sport bike experience without actually being a sport bike and not coming with a lot of the pitfalls of having a sport bike.
Alright, so let's find us an empty lot here somewhere, and we'll hop off the bike and discuss its aesthetics. And I suppose an empty school parking lot is as good as any. Now it is just about sunset, so I'm going to go ahead and angle her just right in the sun there, where we can get a nice good look at her. Alright folks, and there she is, the Yamaha FZ6R. Now when we discuss the options to choose from for what we consider aesthetically pleasing as a first bike, when I look at this bike, and you know, this is my first bike, by the way, so when I looked at this bike back when I was bike shopping, and of course I did a little bit of research and decided on the bike ultimately, but aesthetically speaking, when I first looked at this bike, I was like, yeah, that is a super sport. It's not a super sport, but it's got the look, the sharp lines, all the sharp angles, but the curves where it counts, right? 5 years later, guys, and she still looks cherry. I mean, that is a good looking bike. But yeah, man, when you talk about an all-purpose, generally speaking, beginner's motorcycle in the 600cc class, this is the beginner 600cc motorcycle for the masses. Okay, so we hyped up the bike a whole lot, and you know what? Justifiably so. This is a bike that deserves to be hyped up. Now, ergonomically speaking, I want you to look at the plane of this motorcycle. Look at the seat height. Another cool feature of the FZ6R is that it has an adjustable seat height. I'm 5'11", and I went ahead and raised it up to the highest setting. It has two settings, low, where this seat is flush with the frame here, and the high setting, which I like to ride on. Just because my inseam is a little, you know, it's a little longer. This motorcycle does not come from the factory with clip-on bars. This is the Woodcraft kit that I added after the fact. The factory bars are actually on little risers, and it's a straight bar that has very limited adjustability. But even with an aftermarket set of bars like that, you will notice that the rider's triangle is way less aggressive than a Super Sport. For example, like on the R6, man, this seat, the orientation of this seat would be more like this. You know what I mean? You sit on a bike like an R6, it feels like you're literally sitting on the highest point of the bike itself. The FZ6R, when you sit on it, you see it's got a higher tank than a Super Sport does, and you kind of sit in the motorcycle. I don't know how else to explain that, but it's a huge difference. I've sat on R6s, and they have a very aggressive stance and a very aggressive seating position. Even with the clip-ons on this bike, you are not leaned over. I am flat-footing this bike. Again, I'm 5'11", and I want you to see that I'm flat-footing this thing, right? And I can also hold on to the bars, man, and I am leaned over ever so slightly. Even with the factory bars, it was just about right here, you know? So you don't feel a big difference on your back going from factory height down to clip-on height. So from a beginner's perspective, you have the performance you want, you have the looks you want, and you have the ergonomics you want. The closest thing by comparison, in my personal opinion, is the Honda CBR 650R, which is also an inline 4 kind of a entry-level sport touring application like the FZ6R. Similar fuel mapping and stuff, but it puts 50cc on top of what the Yamaha offers. And so with that being said, it kind of also comes down to a brand preference, right? Yamaha or Honda. And now that we've done nothing but praise this bike, and believe you me, what this bike has to offer, it speaks for itself. But with all that out of the way, let's talk about the cons, because there are cons. Con number one, this is a heavy machine. Now, the FZ6R is 467 pounds. 467 pounds compared to a Yamaha R6, which comes in at just over 400. So you're talking about, you know, a medium-sized child difference in weight there. Now, don't get me wrong. The FZ6R will lean over with the best of them, but she's not going to be quite as nimble in the process compared to a Super Sport. Now, comparing her to a Super Sport brings us to the next con. This bike does not have upside-down forks. It has a standard fork layout, and all that really means is that it lends itself to the lack of flickability that sort of complements the heaviness of the machine. But the fact that it has standard forks is certainly not a deal breaker. Now, as we mount back up on the bike to proceed off into the proverbial sunset, one last thing worth mentioning, that we've talked about all her pros and all her cons, is price. This motorcycle was discontinued like in 2017 to 2018. In that model year, in that cusp, they axed the FZ6R. And so with that being said, they can be found for quite a steal, guys. This 2009 model I purchased in 2015 for $3,500. And it had 11,000 miles on it. You can find these bikes for the same price point today, newer models, newer year models. It's worth looking. Check Craigslist. Look on the Cycle Trader app. They are out there. In fact, I happen to know that you can find these bikes brand new on the showroom floor, 0 miles with full Yamaha factory warranty. They are still out there, guys. Diamonds in the rough, just waiting to be found. So anyways, guys, if you are looking into getting into motorcycling and you are curious about your first bike, and you want a 600cc because that's what everybody else gets, this would be the one, the safest, so to speak, that you can hop on, the Yamaha FZ6R.
So that's our pick. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, make sure to go down and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.
And again, this is Half Click Up out of Waco, Texas, and that's been Blahkay out of sunny San Diego, California. But if you did enjoy this content, by all means, smash the like button. Comment if you have any questions down below. Subscribe if you haven't already. Myself and Blahkay will catch you guys in the next episode. Peace and goodbye.